Now, I don't really feel the need to repeat myself, because as I'm sure if you've been watching my channel for a while now, then you know I bring up one particular point when it comes to any game that tasted the slightest bit of success. And that is that either the company itself or anybody else wants to capitalize on said success. But one aspect I never really mentioned on when discussing that topic were spin-offs. Yes, in a lot of franchises' case, games that originally were under the umbrella of one genre tended to want to branch out and explore new ventures to hopefully reach a wider audience that perhaps wasn't all too interested in the original genre said IP originated from. And while some of these ventures were met with great success, others not so much. Yes, enough beating around the bush, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you're looking at an obese plumber that never does said plumbing, instead chasing after a woman that's more into scalies than Joseph Stalin, to a blue hedgehog that's fanbase really loves him, to an orange bandicoot that's got the amounts of cognitive functionality as a US president. Where all three of these franchises started out as 2D and 3D platformers, their success landed them perfectly into expansion into different genres. All three of them went on to star in their very own racing games, party games, and game genres they normally wouldn't be associated with, like RPGs or beat-em-ups. And these three franchises are just three in countless examples of games that went on to star in their very own kinds of spin-offs. But one game franchise that hasn't really budged all that much from its original genre and remained pretty consistent throughout its life is the indie horror genre's favorite cash cow, Five Nights at Freddy's. Yes, since it's the Bear's 10th anniversary, which I covered on a retrospective video not too long ago that none of you watched, so shame on you. It seems that to celebrate this occasion, we were graced by two official games under the FNAF brand, the first of which being Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, an adaptation of a pretty beloved book in the franchise, and one that I beat recently. Thanks so much to T-Pain Cat for the review code. And also alongside that game, a demo for an upcoming racing game called 5 Laps at Freddy's. Now, why this game is confusing to me is, well, the obvious, as well as the fact that we all know FNAF is probably one of, if not the biggest face in indie horror, and horror in general. But with a franchise as large as this, I'm genuinely surprised it took over a decade to get an official spin-off title like this. I mean, of course there were fan-made games, and Scott did create FNAF World, which was probably the first time this series branched off into a completely different genre, and I guess Pizzeria Sim counts too, but that game was still primarily a horror game. But a racing game containing all the beloved characters we've all grown to know and love and happily piss ourselves when they decide to speak at an unreasonably high decibel seemed like it would be a no-brainer. But let's do a little bit of a sidetrack here for a second. Hey, almost like when a car veers off the racetrack. I am so funny with my puns, I should start a YouTube channel. A little thing that I tend to do before I take a crack at playing a video game or making a video on said game is sometimes I tend to do a little bit of research. The thing a lot of us hated doing in school, but is a damn near necessity if you don't want to look like an ass on the internet. Not that I've succeeded at avoiding such scrutiny. But regardless, before I wanted to start playing, I wanted to know what I was getting myself into. And what I was met with was, I'm starting to think that this game got as warm of a welcome as the Borderlands movie. So being a YouTuber that is in no way afraid to share his distaste on a game, for better or for worse, I just got even more and more excited to play this game. And I did. On stream, in fact. I'll link the full VOD in the description below if you want my full unfiltered thoughts on the game. But this negative reception still piqued my curiosity. How the hell do you mess up a simple kart racing game featuring characters who would be more inclined to traumatize a generation than to cause fond memories? It's not like the concept of a shitty racing game doesn't exist. I mean, we got the obvious culprits like Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, Flat Out 3, Yaris, and M&M's kart racing. And whilst I'm not too sure if these games are really bad, just more shovelware games like Garfield Kart, Madagascar, and DreamWorks Kart, and other examples like that, how hard could it really be to mess up a FNAF racing game? Surely, since this is the funny bear's 10th birthday and his first foray in the same genre where it's not as frowned upon to drive with your eyes closed and mildly intoxicated, it couldn't be that bad, right? Oh, how wrong I was. But let's get some history out of the way first. So this is something that I found quite interesting. The game was both developed and published by Clickteam, the company that owns the engine that Scott used to actually create the original FNAF games and many others in the franchise. So having the actual people who owns the engine responsible for creating this franchise seemed quite poetic in a weird sort of way. But then all this magic is lost when you learn that the game was developed using Unreal Engine 4. I mean, mean, that sort of makes sense, right? Clickteam Fusion mostly requires you to click, so I don't exactly know how well that would translate over into a racing game. But I already kind of found this to be a red flag. How is a company that primarily created an engine for point-and-click games going to make a fully 3D racing game on a completely different engine? But I've rambled for long enough. I'm no fucking furry clickbait raccoon. So let's actually jump in and see what this game is like. So upon loading the game up, we're immediately thrusted into the main menu. There's a kart. There's the game's title. There's the same hilltops from Fortnite, and there's a garage that I hope you aren't wandering in the dead of night because you might be met with a good Birmingham welcome. Here are our three options, only two of which are going to be useful, that being new game and the exit game button. And here are our two disclaimers that tell us we shouldn't be too harsh on their game because it isn't done yet. You sure came to the wrong channel, my friend. Ooh. But any case, let's click on new game and see what lies beyond the outside of this fine motor establishment. So upon clicking new game, we get immediately thrusted into the character select screen where we're met with these cute yet uncanny versions of Freddy Fazbear and the rest of the gang in this weird, cheapy yet not so cheapy art style. Regardless, Freddy looking all perked up and happy to see us and giving us the tip of the hat like he's about to tie us to cinder blocks and drop us into the Marianas Trench. Bonnie looking like he's just woken up after a fan or jorking sesh. Chica looking like she wants your phantom tax, and the fact that I just said that, maybe Freddy should just end me. Foxy looking like he's posing for a Twitter artist to do with him as they please. The puppet just looking happy to be here, same with Mangle. Balloon Boy seeming like he wishes for all the pain to end, and Springtrap looking like he's the only guy aware of what people think about this game. So with that in mind, I obviously picked him. But before we move on, a thing that I'm rather confused with is the fact that every single character seems to have their own specific class. What this class means exactly, I have absolutely no idea. Does it mean their speed, handling, likelihood to murder a child? I'm not too sure. Though, saying that last theory, the fact that Springtrap and Mangle's classes are both maxed out, I'm starting to think that my theory isn't too far-fetched at all. Anyway, after selecting your character, you're then allowed to pick one of three different karts. You have your bog standard go-kart, you have the cup kart themed after Mr. Cupcake, or as I like to call it, the Diabetes Mobile, and finally, the most fan-favorite vehicle I can imagine is the Midnight Motor from the popular FNAF 6 minigame where William Afton decides to go drunk driving on his way back from McDonald's. After selecting what vehicle you want, we're then allowed to select one of three tracks. We have Fazbear Hills, a completely original track for this game, Midnight Motorist, a 3D rendition on FNAF 6's minigame, and finally the sinkhole being themed after FNAF Security Breach's underground segment. I should also mention that there are two locked modes aside from your box standard races, one of which I can make out and the other probably just being a time trial mode, so let's just say we aren't really that spoiled for choice. But with all of the formalities out of the way, let's start finally talking about the game. We get our swooping flyby shots of the track we're about to race on, see all the other racers on the track, hear V1 Ultra Kill countdown, and then the race finally starts. And at first glance, what the flying fuck are these controls? Yes, now I'm pretty sure Clickteam must be situated somewhere in Europe because these are some foreign controls if I've ever seen any. So let's get a load of this because this game's control scheme basically writes the jokes for themselves. So to accelerate, you need to press left trigger. Reversing and braking is the left bumper. Drift for whatever reason is on the right trigger. And at the very least, they got the boost button right. I don't know who the hell thought that this would be a good control scheme for a racing game when a million other games got it down almost 3 decades ago. But whatever. I fixed the controls to my liking and then I was somewhat able to play. I say somewhat because I feel like I'm driving a car that's busy being pushed back by a bulldozer with how heavy everything feels, and when I veer off track, I might as well have gotten myself stuck in cement because it took forever to get out. But before I go on further with my complaints, what is the goal in FNAF? Well, if you've actually played a racing game, then good for you, you can leave now. But yeah, that's basically it. You go throughout all these different tracks trying to get into first place. That's pretty much it. But seeing that this is a kart racing game, it's a little bit more interesting than the games where you race in cars neither me or you will be able to afford in our lifetime. Because scattered throughout the maps, you can get a bunch of different power-ups that can either be used offensively or defensively. Namely, in this game's case, the ones that I found anyway, Mr. Mr. Cupcake, which acts like a mushroom in Mario Kart, giving you a boost of speed, a rocket that acts like what I'm assuming is the red shells from Mario Kart, where it homes onto other enemies, a bomb that causes AoE damage to yourself or anybody else that's caught in its vicinity, a laser gun, which is the green shell variant in this game, being a laser bolt that ricochets off different surfaces until it hits its desired target, a magnet that I assume makes you appreciate the art that went into it, because I sure as hell couldn't find out what this thing did, fries, which are not only a health hazard if you consume too much, but in this game's case acts like a banana peel with you slipping on its grease, a mirror that covers you in a bunch of glass shards, so I'm assuming that this acts both as an offensive and defensive shield, and lastly what I thought was the tablet from the first FNAF game, but I was extremely mistaken, fake fan I realize, but this is actually the shutter door from the first FNAF game, which blocks the road and causes you and other vehicles to crash if you collide into it. Other than those power-ups, there are also these two pickups that you can also get your hands on, one of which increases the size of your boost gauge, and the other one I'm gonna assume acts like the Wumpa Fruit in CTR, just increasing your car's base speed, though I'm not too sure about that. When it comes to your actual character control here, you're able to do the basics of any other kart racing game. You can accelerate, you can brake, you can drift, you can jump, you know, the basics. And in this game specifically, you also have access to a boost at all times that you can fill up by completing successful drifts or running through these panels that recharge the gauge. And that's pretty much the basics of what this game has. Now you might be wondering to yourself, well, that just sounds like any other kart racing game on the market, so what does this game do to help it stand out from amongst the crowd? Well, two things actually. It remembers what franchise it's from.
Oh no, I've done shitted myself.
And takes inspiration from a game you wouldn't expect, and that being Sonic 06. That being that the game doesn't work.
I gotta put the display capture on. Fatal error. The Unreal Engine flap game crashed. Oh no!
Let's start with the former though. The one standout thing that I actually really like in this game is that after a certain amount of time has passed, the game will go into what it calls the night shift. And once that happens, the entire world changes around you into this hellish nightmarescape that I'm pretty sure pays homage to those VR sections in FNAF Ruin. This doesn't really do anything to the stage itself except visually. However, once you head into the night shift, you're going to be pursued by this OC, which is indicated by this icon at the top of your character's head, and when it reaches you, it jump scares you, causing you to stand still for a little bit, giving the other racers a chance to overtake you. There's also this 3-section red bar that shows up at the top of your screen, and I for the life of me can't tell for shit what this is supposed to mean. Is this what tells you your likelihood of getting jumped? How fast your patience is running out? I'm not too sure. And moving on to the latter now.
And another fatal fucking error! Okay, hang on, I need 2 of these. Yeah, there you go. Another time. There we go. Everybody in chat is my witness. This game crashed on me 2 times on the same fucking map. Awesome.
Yes, after just starting to play the game, I can already start to see where other YouTubers were coming from when they said that this game is glitchy and unplayable. While saying the game is unplayable is definitely stretching it a little bit, I'll explain why later, your carts just feel so heavy and unnatural to control. And one of the major reasons for this is that your cart is just a little bit too responsive. When you hit the brake, you'll come into almost an immediate standstill, like you actually care not to hit a deer in the middle of the road. And when it comes to drifting, which is the primary thing that you're going to need to use in order to turn corners way easier and to build up your boost gauge, holding that drift in for too long or pushing too far on the control stick will cause you to make a damn U-turn, screwing yourself over like a motherfucker. And if the carts themselves aren't handling like shit, whenever you do stuff you're not supposed to do, that being going off track or colliding with any part of said track, you're almost extremely likely to come to a fucking stop when you go off the road, or you'll be so magnetized to whatever part of the wall you hit, you can practically sign up for a divorce by the time you get unstuck. This shit happened to me way more times than I'm comfortable to admit, and I needed to restart entire races just to get my bearings and try to get used to the game's controls. And that also doesn't really help because the fact that the game doesn't have a reset position option, or an option just to restart the race. So either you hope you're able to recover fast enough so you can catch up again, or you're just going to have to restart the race by heading back to the main menu, reselecting your character, card, and map, just to repeat the cycle and hope that new bullshit doesn't happen to you during your next race. But that alone isn't the sole reason why I say this game doesn't work, because if you paid attention to the clip that I put in for everybody, this game crashed on me not only once, but twice. And the most annoying thing out of everything is the fact that the game can just bug out and just flat out refuse to let you finish a race. This primarily happened to me on the sinkhole map, which I suppose is fitting. The game that this map is based off of wasn't exactly known for being the best behaved either. Now what I mean by this is the following. Your car can either get stuck on the walls of the map, magnetize on this section of the map, making you think that the car itself got bit by a radioactive spider, or even if you're able to get yourself unstuck from the wall, the game is just gonna spawn you back to the last checkpoint because it sure as fuck doesn't seem to realize that I'm okay and I'm able to move forward. What kind of shit is this? Yeah, no, I think this game takes the cake of not just being one of the worst games in this franchise, but also one of the worst racing games I personally ever played. And the community seems to genuinely agree with that. But why? Well, I think there's an obvious answer to all of this. This game was just rushed out of the gate. And said rushing, I think, is no surprise to coincide with the 10th anniversary of FNAF. This demo did come out an entire day before it, after all. But what I find hilarious is that the full game is only going to release next year. So why release a buggy, unfinished demo that's putting more of a sour taste in people's mouth than excitement? And what sucks about this the most is that I can see a good game in here, because when everything works as I'm sure the devs intended, it's actually pretty fun to keep that momentum going and try to win each race. And with some more polish and content, I can at the very least say that I think by the time this game actually comes out, it can be a decent to good racing game featuring your favorite FNAF characters. But for what we have right now, this is a game that I definitely think you should pass on. But hey, at the very least, not all was lost on this beloved franchise 10th anniversary, and I'll be sure to cover why that is in the next video.